All right, we're going to call committee to hold order. We're talking about the city center parking garage. Greg and Peter, the floor is yours.
Just the tech I took.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the City Council. I'm Greg Zimmerman, Renton's Public Works Administrator, and Peter and I are going to give you a briefing on the situation with the City Center parking garage and the Metro lease. And I'm going to start off the discussion with take a step back in history a little bit and go back to when Renton and King County Metro combined to build the downtown transit center and the circumstances and the cost contributions that went into that. And then Peter's going to talk about the lease. So we're breaking it down that way. I'm going to show you a plan view of what the transit center looked like. This was a plan from 1999. We entered into an agreement with King County Metro in 2000 that established our joint responsibilities and cost contributions to the transit center. This drawing's a little bit busy. I apologize for that. But it's a plan view of what the original concept, and the transit center did get built pretty close to this original concept. You'll see in the north is to the right, and that's South 2nd Street on the right-hand side. This area that is kind of highlighted by green, where the landscaping strips are, is a surface-level parking area established where our parking garage is now. There was 84 spaces in that parking area. And of course, that's been replaced by the garage at this time. So the transit center concept did include this lot and the 16 spaces parking spaces that are on the north side of the pavilion building. So the original concept had about 100 parking spaces when they were going forward. In April of 2000, Renton and King County Metro entered into an interlocal agreement to build the transit center. The design, construction, use, and maintenance were all established in that April 2000 interlocal agreement. Sound Transit, of course, this was before they were involved, and they were not a participant in the cost or constructing the transit center. Preliminarily, Renton, before the transit center was located in its downtown location, Renton worked pretty hard with the businesses and car dealers in order to establish that area for a different use. That's the point of time where we created the traffic mall on the southwest corner of Grady and Rainier, where and Good Chevrolet, that was located in this area, relocated into the new auto mall at that time, leaving that property open, which we purchased. The City of Renton purchased for the purpose of building the piazza and of course, we got the pavilion with it, and also the transit center. Renton purchased and owns the transit center property. The purchase price, this is going to sound like it's not very high, but of course it was back in 2000, so it was 15 years ago, was $350,000 for that piece of property where the transit center sits right now. Metro has a 30-year lease to provide transit operations on the property. Renton and King County Metro shared in the design, the construction, and the construction management costs for the transit center, and I'm going to go through in my next slide how that broke down, our joint contributions to the cost of that. Renton funded the cost of improvements along Burnett Avenue south between South 2nd and South 4th Street, and also contributed $205,000 to the covered walkway that goes east-west. So we shared costs with King County Metro on that walkway. King County Metro funded all the improvements comprising the east-west section of the transit center and the new parking areas, so they were the ones that actually paid for the construction of that original surface-level parking with the 84 spaces. Kiosks, landscaping, streetlights, bus shelters, benches, and the relocation of the clock tower were all in King County Metro's responsibility. The way that breaks down is Renton, as I said, acquired the property for about $350,000. Our local contribution, design, construction, and construction management, was $942,000. We also brought some grants into play, which I'll come to in a minute. So Renton's total out-of-pocket contribution to the transit center was about $1.3 million. King County Metro contribution to the design, construction, and construction management was fairly similar. Their out-of-pocket costs were $1.3 million. Then there were some other contributory costs to the transit center as well. The private contribution was $140,000. I think those were frontage improvements done by Metropolitan Place and Daly during that time. Renton received $1.1 million in grants, which we applied toward this project, and King County received $1.3 million in grants that they applied to the project, for a total price of about $5 million. That was the cost of building the transit center. So the three contributors were really Renton, King County Metro, and the private contribution. Our contribution and Metro's contribution, if you throw in the property, was fairly similar. It was a pretty close split. And of course, as Peter will get into, and I think you're already aware, the city went it alone in buying in building the parking garage. So this is just for the transit center.
And Council, I think also, we can double check, but I think our 50-50 match on this is not typical of the other transit centers constructed around. I think most of those were constructed either in whole or nearly in whole by either Sound Transit or King County Metro.
Yep. That is correct. That's our understanding is too.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Mr. Taylor.
Greg, are these numbers cumulative?
These,
Yes, these are the total project costs.
yeah, they were the project costs for the acquisition of property and the construction of the transit center and some related street improvements. So this is the total cost.
So that's the total cost back in 2000.
Back in 2000, exactly. Be a little more expensive now. So I'm going to go back to the last slide because there was a couple other things I was going to mention. This was one of Metro's first transit-oriented development projects. That was a big initiative back in 2000 when this was built. And of course, the Daly multifamily development with the Metropolitan Place and so forth was one of their big first transit-oriented development projects. So one of the things that King County Metro did is work an arrangement with Metropolitan Place to use some of their structured parking, to lease some of their structured parking for transit parking as well. So initially they had that agreement and they had the surface parking, and then Peter's going to get into the eventual discussion and entering into a lease with Renton for the spaces at our parking garage. Construction of the transit center went forward in 2000 and 2001. So really, it was only about 3 years later until the parking garage was built. So there was not a really big lapse of time there. Metro has 150 lease spaces at the Metropolitan Place. And we looked at how much of those leased parking spaces are used. On an average, this is for 12 months throughout 2014, the Metropolitan Place garage was 96% occupied, so almost all the spaces were taken there, and this is in the morning commute. On the Renton side, our 200 spaces that we have, 86% used. So that leads to the arithmetic is if King County Metro were to reduce their amount of leased spaces by 50, in the 2014 numbers, there wouldn't be enough spaces available for all the people that use those two facilities. They'd be about 30 short on an average. And a couple of other things we have found out. You want to distribute that map, Doug? Sound Transit boardings are approximately 29% of the amount of morning use. So 71% is Metro King County boardings, 29% is Sound Transit boardings on their 2 bus routes that go through the transit station. These are the morning.
I'm sorry, Greg, can you repeat those numbers, please?
Okay, yes, about approximately 29% of the boardings in the 3 morning hours are Sound Transit boardings on their 2 bus routes, and the other 71% of the boardings are on the Metro routes. So that's the rough breakdown about how the station is used by the 2 transit agencies. We know that Sound Transit doesn't pay any rent or any usage charges to the city of Renton. We don't think, the information we've got is they don't pay to King County Metro either. So they're using the facilities, but I don't think, to the knowledge we have, they're not cost contributors to the annual use of those facilities. The map that Peter just handed out to you comes from a 2011 license plate survey. It's kind of old, so you have to take that into context. The survey's 4 years old, and we don't have any more recent information. But if you look at the map, the red dots show where the cars are, the ownership of the cars are that used the transit facility, that parked in the garage back in 2011. And it's very close to 50-50%. 50% of the origins are from within the city limits of Renton. About 50% of them are outside of the Renton city limits. Most of them are in our annexation areas, but they're outside of our city limits, most of that 50%. So I know that there was some interest in the usership. Once again, I caution that these are 4-year-old, this is a 4-year-old license plate survey, so I'm not sure it's exactly up to date now. Well, I know it's not up to date. I'm not sure how accurate the 50-50 is at this point. So that's some basic background information about the transit center and how it was built and who contributed costs to it. Before I turn it over to Peter, who's going to focus on the actual garage part of the equation, is there any questions?
Any questions from council?
Good background.
Okay.
Yes, I have one question.
Go ahead, Mr. Taylor.
Greg, you mentioned that Sound Transit is not a contributor to the annual cost for the garage. Are they contributors in other jurisdictions? And if so, can you tell us a little bit about that?
We actually did a little bit more research on King County Metro than we did on Sound Transit. That's some follow-up work we're going to do. This particular item was also referred, I believe, to the Transportation Committee, so we're going to come back with some more information on subjects like that subject. We have more information about Metro's other uses, not so much on Sound Transit yet, so we're
I
going to
can
look that up.
tell you without, we'll verify the numbers, but the Kent Station, Kent Park and Ride, that's mostly Sound Transit. Federal Way, I know, was constructed by Sound Transit, the parking structure and the park and ride facility. Auburn was constructed by Sound Transit. Sumner was constructed by Sound Transit. Virtually every other suburban transit center was constructed or either whole or in part by
Issaquah was
ST.
Sound Transit too.
Yeah. So we'll double check. I don't know about Bellevue, how much of that was Metro and how much is Sound Transit, but we'll get those numbers for you.
Yeah.
Councilmember Palmer?
No, that's what I was going to say. I think Bellevue was both, a
Okay.
mixture of both, but I don't know how much.
We'll
I don't
try-
know
we'll-
if any other parking garage or facility that was solely the city or that jurisdiction.
I'm not aware of any either at this time.
This is one where I think we were ahead of the curve. So we were ahead of ST, of Sound Move, and that part of that was to construct park and ride and transit center facilities in the suburbs, and that's because ours was already constructed, they didn't have to do that here. So we, in our efforts to try to be out there as soon as we could and provide a transit center for folks and take advantage of the new philosophy of transit centers that we're going to serve suburb to suburb, we got ahead of the funding that was available for most all the other suburban cities.
Mr. Chair.
Don, then Greg.
Well, haven't been around for a while, I thought the whole idea of building the parking garage in downtown Renton, because it was sold to the council, that it was going to generate business. It was basically built because the business community was saying, if we don't have any parking and people can't come downtown and shop. So it was not built as a Metro park and ride lot. That basically came in after the garage was built, and the people didn't flock to downtown Renton to shop like the council was promised at the time. And then Metro was hard up for parking, and so that's when they came to the city and wanted to rent space from us. And that's my understanding from the way this is. So I think to classify it as, we built it for transit parking, that's a misnomer, but it was decided, obviously for financial reasons, for maintenance, it made sense to rent some of those. And those places were rented out with the understanding that at such time as downtown got built up and it was needed for other parking downtown, that Metro would be out of it. So it was built, the original lease was for temporary parking, and I'm pretty sure, am I right, Randy? I think.
Yeah, oh, absolutely, everything you've said, yeah.
Right.
Yes, in addition, Greg, to the construction participation that Sound Transit has had in other jurisdictions, also interested in terms of monthly contributions they're making as well.
We'll be looking at that too. Because interestingly enough, we found out with Metro, even in some facilities that they were contributors to in paying for the facility, they also still are sustaining monthly lease charges. And Peter will get into that a little bit.
That'd be a nice deal.
Peter, the floor is yours.
Wait, no,
Oh, just a
Ruth.
second.
Ruth, go ahead. I'm sorry, I didn't see you down there, Ruth.
Sorry. It's my understanding, Don, that, but correct me if I am wrong, that when this parking lot was built, it was planned for the future of the revitalization of, I'm sorry for my English, of downtown, right?
Right.
We're planning for we're looking here at the big picture, right? Not just Metro, not just what is downtown right now, but we're planning for
That's right.
20 years ahead, right?
Yes, actually, if we could go back and find the paperwork that was presented to the council, there was this formula showing how it was going to increase the sales tax, and it would be self-supporting
Yeah.
with all the people immediately that were going to use it. And it was not ever considered to be used for bus parking or transit parking.
Yeah, but also, correct me please if I'm wrong, in the process when we build this, we are still thinking this is for the future again of
That's correct.
Renton, right?
You're right. The structure, the demand at the time did not call for 630 spaces. I think at the time, then Mayor Tanner, and we all looked at this and thought, if you're going to start building a garage, the incremental cost of some additional spaces on top of the current demand needs, it's a sound investment to build it now. So the garage was built for the future, as you said. It was overbuilt for the current demand and built for the future. And the idea was that eventually we would have development downtown that would need those extra spaces, and it was, and so we can go back and look at the paperwork. But I think the point that Councilman Person is making is accurate. We did not build a garage to satisfy the transit center. That was not the purpose of the garage.
Thank you.
Peter?
Okay, the parking garage opened in June of 2003. There's 7 stories there with 562 spots, and it cost $8.5 million. There are ground floor suites on the east and west side that were largely unfinished until a few years ago when we turn them over to the police department for substations in the area. And at that time, we insulated them and put in heat and plumbing and so forth. So at some point in the future, for posterity purpose, it may be possible to turn those back into retail spaces. Diamond Parking Service has managed that garage since 2008, and I know some of you have received emails from constituents about, who does what over there. And so what they do is to provide enforcement. That's really their primary reason. Before they started, people were parking just wherever they wanted to park, and not using the parking machines, and it was very difficult to maintain form of order there. The enforcement officers also carry little scoops and brooms, and so as they're performing their 3 or 4 times daily routine, they pick up obvious litter. They have a machine that comes through once a month, one of those truck-mounted machines that vacuums the entire garage. They service and repair the parking stations, parking ticket stations, which is no small feat. And then they have a service like AAA where they bail people out who left their lights on or ran out of gas or something like that. The facilities division is responsible to clean the stairwell, the elevator lobbies. Inside the elevators, we do some vandalism repair and power washing as required. There are people who purchase monthly parking permits, primarily, I believe, downtown employees, and those work out to be about $42.50 a month. That is handled through Diamond Parking's online service. On a subscription basis, you can buy a permit for a whole year, or you can have it automatically come out every month, sort of like Netflix. Metro has the top 150 spaces in the facility. We had previously had them lower in the garage, but that complicated the enforcement for Diamond. So a few years ago, we moved their 150 spaces to the top, or 200, whatever, as it was at that time. So to Don's point about the garage not being, Councilmember Person's point about the garage not being built with the intent of providing parking for Metro, the way that the first lease was constructed was that, as you can see on this slide, that the more spaces they took, the more it was going to cost. And so the intent there was that they would not ever get to the point, likely, of filling the whole garage with commuters. However, that lease was very difficult to support because we ran into issues of how many people were actually parked there, and with this variable amount, it became quite clear that we were going to spend a lot of time and effort trying to keep track of who was in there and argue about whose figures were right and what time of day and those sorts of things. So we made an amendment in 2008 that changed the rate to a flat fee. And by this time, it's pretty clear that the number of people using the spaces had stabilized. It was right around 250. And I was pretty active taking counts myself at that time, and the highest use was in 2008. Then in 2009, we terminated the original terms that were confusing, and then went to the top 250 spaces at $15 a foot. And then the next 4 years, we had an amendment that we brought forward that kept the terms the same. However, in the last of those 4 years, we spoke with Metro about the need to raise the cost, because we felt that for the cost of operating the garage, we really needed to have more support from them. And also in the meanwhile, Metro had located some additional parking lots, land-based, or rather on dirt, churches and so forth, and diverted some of their ridership out of the transit center and to the suburban or the outer locations. And so the number of transit users using the park and ride garage or the city garage went down. We then started negotiations with them to raise the rate from $15 to $30 over a 2-year period. You might remember this was right about the time when they were going through their extreme budget difficulties, and there was a lot of back and forth and resistance to that increase, but we worked out an arrangement whereby they'd have some time to get used to it. But their bottom line was that they were going to have to reduce the number of spaces from 200, in effect at that time, down to 100 because they couldn't afford any more expense. And so that was where we found ourselves effective as of January 1st this year. However, I think that because of public comment that Metro got, and because of public comment that we got, that we passed along to Metro, even before January 1st, they decided it would be in everyone's best interest to raise the number of spaces they had up to 150, and they do still maintain in their lease the option to increase from 100 to 200, so they went halfway on that. Their comments were that the average, according to their counts, was 157 on average every day. And I think Greg's comments about the capacity is 173. So we'll see how that works out as time goes on and we start to hear from users of the garage. Now, I did get some information back from Metro about other leases that are in place, and these fall into 3 broad categories. The first is the TOD,
Transit-oriented development.
transit-oriented development, and they built 3 garages that they named using those funds. And I've included the 2 that are the closest in capacity and in character for your review. But you can see that they invested a lot of money on the front end, and when you divide that out and then add that to the lease rates that they're still having to pay in those places, it adds up to quite a bit more than the $30 per space that they're paying to the city. Now, obviously, also there are places that have a higher demand, and I don't know exactly where Renton falls in comparison to these 2 examples, but the point is that they do spend considerably more in other places to support each individual parking space. Another category that they have is that they allow other people to park on their property, but those tend to be more casual or occasional weekend off-hour parking, those sorts of things.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Mr. Taylor.
Greg, I'm seeing that we've got a couple of examples in North Seattle. Do we have any similar South County examples of what they're paying and what they're doing?
I think we're going to have to do some more research on that, particularly to include Sound Transit, because Sound Transit is the agency that built a lot of the parking structures in the South County, the South City. So we'll get some more information on that.
I think it would be good so that we can compare more apples to apples in terms of the ridership, the population that is similar to the population that we have utilized in our transit system.
We'll do that.
these are the numbers that we asked Metro for, and they're the only numbers they gave us. So we're working off numbers that Peter worked hard to try to get from the county, and we're working with other sources to try to get other information, but that's partly why it's not complete.
They're probably paying more elsewhere.
I think, frankly, there is one garage where we're quite sure that's the case, because we've got the owner saying he's been told contractually he can't divulge the rate that he's paying, which is completely bogus because it's a public contract.
yeah.
And Metro won't give us the number, so we'll just keep working them.
Interesting.
Well, I guess if there's a silver lining to the cloud on this, it's that, I've seen some of the messages that your constituents have sent in, and they're concerned that the city of Renton hasn't been generous enough in terms of supporting public transit use, and I think this shows that that's exactly what the city of Renton has done since the garage was built.
Mr. Person?
Yeah, Peter, just as far as the maintenance on the garage goes, I'm just assuming, and this is the wrong thing to do, but the more people that use the garage, most likely the more wear and tear and the more maintenance, so that we would have on the garage picking up dirt and stuff like that.
Yeah, there is more of that, and we find, for example, during the summer when we've got a farmer's market and it's more heavily used, sometimes up to the fourth floor is full of parkers, that yes, we do have to make sure to send somebody over on Wednesday morning to get it picked up, and that isn't the case other times of the year.
And I guess a follow-up to that, how do we know that people are Metro parkers? I mean, we give 150, we don't give, but we lease 150 spaces. Do those people then have to show a good-to-go pass, or it's just on an honor system that those 150 spaces are used by?
That's exactly right.
Yeah, I think if we were to start to enforce that, council, what you'd end up having to do is have an attendant at the front of the garage, and the cost of that attendant would certainly more than would cover way more than the cost we're receiving through our current leases. I think for me, it's between Metro and Sound Transit, Renton taxpayers are contributing through sales tax approximately $20 million a year to Metro and approximately $20 million a year to Sound Transit, and you would think that between the $40 million that are being contributed by Renton residents, those two agencies would find a way to help provide parking for their customers in our city without us having to continue to subsidize even further what we're already subsidizing. I'm frustrated like you are that we've got Renton residents who are feeling like it's not fair that they no longer have a place to park. But the question is, how much do we want to continue to subsidize a regional service that in every other suburb appears to be paying much more than they're paying in Renton?
Jay, did you say 40 million a year?
Yes, sales tax that's generated in Renton that goes to Metro, and sales tax is generated in Renton that goes to Sound Transit is about $20 million for each. The 0.3% sales tax equals about $20 million annually.
Yes, Mr. Person.
Well, then on top of Sound Transit, on top of that, gets the excise tax off your license. And I think it was figured, and correct me if I'm wrong on this figure, but it's like that the city of Renton generates to Sound Transit $445 a year per city residence. That includes babies all the way up to that. And that is a lot of money. And for that, in my personal opinion, the only thing we've got from Sound Transit is 2 buses running through the city.
Just past.
The rest is, they have done nothing for the city of Renton, other than threaten to sue us several times.
That's right.
Any other questions from the council?
And Sound Transit's going to be coming at us this year for Sound Transit 3. Can we secede? Is that the right word?
Yeah, we're still waiting for our Sound Move project.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a,
Mr. President?
Mr. Person.
And the other thing is part of the first Sound Move, is that they were supposed to put in a parking structure down on Park Avenue,
That's right.
and we haven't gotten that. I mean, we've gotten nothing. And there's some way we should be able to make them help us.
Right, for the benefit of Councilwoman Perez too, and the rest of you, maybe just for recollection, that Sound Move identified about $78 million in projects that were going to be completed in Renton. That included the direct access connection off of Northeast 8th, including a parking garage, and direct access connection off of Lind. Well, through a series of discussions and negotiations, the direct access connection on Lind was modified and changed, and we ended up getting, Greg and Doug, you have to help me, I think it was $4 million that went to the Strander project, and I want to say 11, but it was 17?
I think it was 16.
16
million towards.
16 million that went to the Rainier Avenue Q-jump and other improvements to try to encourage and improve transit access on Rainier and on the west side. So we're still waiting for the remainder of that, those projects to come in, the Northeast 8th connection, at least in the project, and that hasn't happened. We finally, as you all know, even though this wasn't our project, we lobbied for almost 20 years, 15 years anyway, on the South Center, Transit Center, the commuter rail station in Tukwila, which is a south sub-area project, and Renton is part of the east sub-area. So we argued long and hard about that, and finally, that's now being constructed. But you're right, we haven't received a lot from Sound Transit over the years, despite all the money that our residents have paid into it.
Any other questions from council?
Mr. President?
Yes, Mr.
Yeah, I
Alderman.
agree with all these complaints. I've been very disappointed too with Sound Transit not coming through with many of the promises. But I was wondering, is there a place where some of this information about how much the city of Renton has put forward to subsidize Metro and Sound Transit? Is there an information sheet or a spot on our web that we could sort of lay that out and direct people to that if they have questions?
We, as you know, we have the transportation project page where we have that listed. We could set something up there, or perhaps somewhere else on our website that provides that information.
Yeah, I think it would be nice for people to understand when they don't feel like there's enough parking spots, to just have a little bit of background and really be able to see it the same way we see it, so that they can direct their lobbying to Sound Transit and Metro.
In a bad mood, want to be in an even worse mood, go to this page.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. We can put up a little sign telling them where to look for that. Thanks.
Mr. President?
Mr. Person.
I hate to keep dominating this, but this topic is also in the Transportation Committee, and I think being on the Transportation Committee and talking with the chair, Marcy, that as we're there, we're hoping to look at something that we could give some relief to our citizens. And I don't think there's anybody on the council that if we couldn't prove somehow that you're a city resident parking in that garage, that we would want to give you a big break. But it just, how I put it, grinds me that at least 50% of the people parking in our garage aren't city residents. And, you know, if we just open it up again for free or anything like that, we'll just have more. I mean, you drive around the city and you look at the Fred Meyer parking lot, how many people are park and riding there, which is an unofficial park and ride. But there's hundreds of people that are parking there every day, and it's got a big parking lot. Maybe, I'm just talking, but maybe we could get Metro to make an agreement with Fred Meyers, just even for free, to get some of those parking places, because there's parking there. But those are some of the kinds of things that maybe we can discuss in committee. I'm not, I surely get the sense from the council that we're not going to let this lie.
No.
No. Mr. President,
Yes, Councilwoman Perez.
I agree with Councilmember Corman about the information, that things that we are doing right now to help the commuters, the residents of Renton that are commuters, I think should be a little bit more out, because they don't know really. So they don't know all the efforts and all the hard work that each one of you are doing to help them with the situation. And I think will be important for them to not just have the information of all the things that you have done, but also the things that you are still currently doing with Sound Transit and Metro to be able to negotiate to help them with the parking. Thank you.
We'll be sure to get a link up from this meeting as well.
Good.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Mr.
might I recommend also, something pretty, something like a fact sheet, something that isn't, very complicated, so that, it's very simple to understand. They don't have to do an awful lot of reading and research on it. I mean, for those that want to do that, yes, but whatever link you're going to put up, that if you just kind of put together a little chit sheet, a fact sheet with maybe 10 points, that can just cover some of the basic facts that they would be able to get a hold of right away.
Then make a poster of it, put it up in the garage.
It's not a bad idea.
That's not a bad idea. Our
And
garage.
with that, I'm going to adjourn committee of the whole.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.